And how can so many other school districts not see it that way? That's the other thing, you're not the only one.
No, I know you guys are supporting, from everything I've gathered at this commission and this table, everybody's supporting it. They work in other districts, and they see them doing similar things. I believe we provided the support, and so maybe it's just a determination as to whether the board members feel from a policy perspective, it doesn't create enough exposure for them to be concerned, and we move forward.
Ms. Morgan, if we were to bring this to the board for final determination, how would we first brief it as part of our monthly capital update?
You would make the recommendation, this committee would make the recommendation to the board,
Okay.
and then the board would have to decide.
So it wouldn't come from staff, it would come from the committee.
So the board would probably ask for a presentation by staff on the issue, and then you all would present, and we would have a conversation about it, yeah.
I do a quick workshop on it,
Okay.
and then if we get consensus, then come back to an action meeting where they can actually
Right.
vote on it.
Perfect. Okay.
Was that letter sent out to the committee?
I don't remember seeing.
I thought
I
I
did
forwarded
see it.
the email and there was an attachment to
I'm
that email.
trying to remember if I went to.
Oh, I'm sorry, I sent it to you, Ryan, and I just assumed you were gonna share it, that's my bad.
I'd love to see it.
Yeah,
I just sent it to you.
to me or to Bob?
I think I sent it to you, but if you could share it with the entire CAC membership, that'd be great, or we could do that.
Is that the information from all the other districts?
No.
No, that we already got.
Yeah.
This was a letter from the attorney,
Okay.
and I can flash it up here if you guys would like.
Well, whatever.
I think we ought to let staff go ahead with
Yep.
their presentation and get the information out, and then,
And then we can have that conversation.
Yeah.
First thing in the morning, I will send the entire letter to all of you.
Thank you. Public information.
All right, with that, we go on to updates on development related to local agreements with Lee County. Kathy's specialty.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for asking Cindy and I to join you today. Actually, Ms. Morgan asked us to join you. She inquired about the development-related interlocals, and I told her that we had started an effort last year to start evaluating them. And we are internally staffed, have already been working on that effort, and are excited to hear that you are all interested in that effort as well. So before we get too far along in our staff work of actually making edits to the document, we wanted to have a discussion with you all. We're not sure how familiar you are with this document, so we're happy to do this in two ways. Either we can present to you the highlights of the interlocal and state statute that govern these items today, and then have a discussion today about it, or we can just bring it to your attention. We can send you the information so that you can read it more yourself, and then next month we can come back and have that further discussion. It's completely your choice how you would like to pursue it, but I think either way, we'd like to start with a preliminary presentation, and then you can tell us if you would like to have discussion, if you feel comfortable enough and know enough about the topic. I know some of you are very familiar with the information. I'm not sure how much everyone else is familiar with the
Yeah, you're gonna get a very varying level of familiarity, so.
So it might be better to present the information tonight and do a follow-up presentation next month when people are more familiar with it, but that's your call. We're happy to do it
I mean,
whichever
we should
way.
certainly open up for discussion afterwards, but yeah, following up with the information and having some time to think and formulate an opinion, maybe worth its while as well, so.
Okay. So at that, so what is an interlocal? An interlocal is an agreement that two jurisdictions or governments sign that allow them to pursue work in a mutually beneficial way. We need an interlocal agreement so that we ensure that we ensure that the work is going to be done, and we also establish the parameters by which that work will be accomplished and what the responsibilities and any issues that may be involved in that interlocal are addressed through that agreement. In this specific case, we're dealing with the interlocal related to the development issues in Lee County, and Florida statute has two chapters that address this, 1013 and 163. Now, I can tell you that the only thing that is really clear about the statute is that, one, we need to have an interlocal, and two, that the interlocal needs to address land use issues. It is foggy on other issues, so it talks about that there needs to be a coordination and in collaboration regarding ordinances, but it doesn't specifically say what is to be the outcome of that. So, related specifically to this issue, so in 2008, the Hillsborough County, there was a lawsuit from the school board of Hillsborough County to Hillsborough County Board of County Commissioners. And if you want the full court case, we can certainly forward it to you so you can read it for yourselves. But in effect, what was ruled in this case, because the county was asking the school district to provide for services, off-site services that the district did not feel that they should be obligated to according to state statute. The court case ruled in the district's favor and established the parameters by which a school district cannot be forced to provide any facilities to the school that are not either adjacent to or through the school property. So if a county or municipal government wanted a school to provide turn lanes and they were neither adjacent to or through the school site, that could not be forced. A school district could volunteer to do that work, but they can't be forced through the development order to complete that work. That is significant. That issue came up recently in a project that we all were working on, and we ended up coming to an agreement with the county of how we would address that. But as I said, so it doesn't preclude a district from providing those off-site improvements. It just says that the jurisdiction cannot force the school district to provide those services and facilities, again, unless they are adjacent to or through the facilities. So, but other than that very clear area, as well as that we must comply to land use, so we must be in compliance with the future land use map and the conditions set up through the future land use map. The Florida statutes are vague, and they leave it to the interlocal to really set up the parameters by which a school district and the local municipality will work together. Which leads us to Cindy's discussion about our interlocal. The one thing I will comment on before Cindy starts talking is, in our efforts to open up this agreement for revision and reconsideration, which we all as staff, we support your efforts to do. The one challenge we have in our current agreement is there is nothing in the interlocal that forces the county or the school district for that matter to come to the table. It would have to be a mutually beneficial and mutually agreed upon decision to change the current interlocal, because the interlocal has no end date. So many interlocals will set a sunset period or a review period or something that would say in 10 years, the two jurisdictions will come together and evaluate, or in 10 years, this agreement is sunsetted and will have to be replaced. This interlocal provided for no such caveat. So unless both jurisdictions are willing to come to the table and mutually agree to changing this agreement, there's nothing we can do or the county can do to force us to change this interlocal. So on that caveat, yes?
So you keep talking about the county. Do you have interlocals with other municipalities?
The only municipality we don't have a similar agreement with is the Village of Estero, because we adopted these agreements in 2008, 2009 period before the Village of Estero was incorporated. And it's virtually the same agreement and we have two agreements. One of them is the exact same agreement because all of the jurisdictions signed that same agreement. There's one, which the one is one we're going to talk about. It's basically the same agreement and everyone has signed it.
I saw a couple versions, like the City of Fort Myers is like an 8-page agreement.
Yeah.
Cape Coral is like the same 8-page agreement. Lee County is like 16 pages. And then like Bonita Springs is like 118. You know, it's like a book. I'm assuming that was post 2008. They came back and did it again. at
So,
some point, and they involve lawyers, you know?
so again, we're gonna focus today, we wanna start with the county agreement because that's where most school districts start with your county. And then you use the county agreement as kind of the foundation for the other agreements, but our intent is to have an interlocal for all of them. And in fact, the Village of Star, we have to, because, as I said, one of the things that statute is clear about is that we need an interlocal. So we need to establish an interlocal with the Village of Estero because none exist because they weren't incorporated until very recently. But we are gonna start with we're gonna start with the review of the county, but eventually we will go through all of the jurisdictions.
I'm gonna discuss two interlocals. That 2002 one that you mentioned, is the 898 agreement. And that one is one that was signed by Lee County as well as all of the municipalities that existed at the time, which is the reason why we don't have one right here, as Kathy mentioned. So in the 2002 agreement, we're gonna focus on sections 5 and 6. Section 5 is the supporting infrastructure, and section 6 is the comprehensive plan amendments, rezoning, and development improvements. So I'm just gonna briefly go over what each one of those sections consists of, and then you guys can provide feedback on it whenever you're able.
Can you speak up just a little bit?
Oh, sorry.
Thank you.
Sorry, I can't
I know,
tell
I know.
how much I'm projecting. All right, section 5.1 states, the school board and affected local governments will jointly determine the need for and timing of on-site and off-site improvements necessary to support each new school or the proposed renovation, expansion, or closure of an existing school, and will enter into a written agreement as to the time and location, and the party or parties responsible for constructing, operating, and maintaining the required improvements. So this is very generic, vague language. It doesn't tell us exactly who these parties are and what is assigned to each party. And that's something that a future interlocal or an endeavor to the existing interlocals needs to address.
This is also the section, one of the sections that we feel is in conflict with the Hillsborough County Court case. Because it talks about off-site, which Hillsborough County Court says we don't have to deal with.
Section 6.5 states, in reviewing and approving land use application, rezoning requests, and development proposals, the county and cities will consider the following issues: providing school sites and facilities within planned neighborhoods, ensuring the compatibility of land uses adjacent to existing schools and reserved school sites, the co-location of parks, recreation, and community facilities with school sites, the linkage of schools, parks, libraries, and other public facilities with bikeways, trails, and sidewalks, ensuring the development of traffic circulation plans to serve schools and surrounding neighborhoods, providing off-site signalization, signage, access improvements, and sidewalks to serve all schools, the inclusion of school bus stops and turnarounds in new developments, encouraging the private sector to identify and implement creative solutions in developing adequate school facilities in residential developments, school board comments on comprehensive plan amendments and other land use decisions, and available school capacity with planned improvements to increase school capacity.
And again, G in this case, we would argue would violate the Hillsborough County Court.
And
And F, thank you, and F. So E and F are two that we feel that the county cannot comply to us, but they have used these two sections to say that they can.
Section 6.6 states, in formulating community development plans and programs, the county and the cities will consider the following issues: targeting community development improvements in older and distressed neighborhoods in your schools, giving priority to scheduling county and city programs and capital improvements that are consistent with and meet the capital needs identified in the school facilities plan, giving priority to developments with property owners who provide incentives including, but not limited to, donations of sites, reservation or sale of school sites at pre-development prices, construction of new facilities or renovation to existing facilities and providing transportation alternatives, and working to address and resolve multi-jurisdictional public school issues. And that brings us to the 2009 agreement. This one is specifically with the Lee County BOCC. This is not something that the other cities have agreed to. They, as Ryan had pointed out, they have other agreements in place. So here we're going to be focusing on site plan review and the waiver, exemptions, and limitations. These are the things that they're looking for when they review a development order, essentially. So in connection with this development order review, Lee County was specifically review the adequacy of site plans as they relate to the items set forth below. adequacy of the fire flows and placement of hydrants for fire protection, traffic impact statement, adequacy of site access, off-site turn lanes and utility improvements, site lighting, proposed stormwater outfall, on-site and off-site for proper downstream frontage, sidewalk and bike path improvements, open space and indigenous preservation for commercial standards, site buffering for commercial standards, removal of exotic vegetation, protected species survey and management if applicable, impacts on archaeological and historic resources, and compatibility with adjacent land uses. The one thing I wanted to point out here is that in sections G and H, it mentions for commercial standards, but when you look at the Lee County Land Development Code, it excludes Lee County School District from having to abide by these standards. So that's just something to realize, that there are some inconsistencies between the agreement and what's existing today in their code. Section 13 is the waiver, the construction of new educational facilities, the expansion of existing facilities that increase the student population by more than 5%, stadiums, and construction that changes the primary use of a facility must obtain a development order pursuant to the Land Development Code. The county will waive the following requirements. Assurance of completions for off-site improvements, provided the school board obtains appropriate assurance of completion sureties as part of the contracts for construction of off-site improvements and the review of wetland impacts. Section 14 is exemptions/limitations. Lee County review is not required for the following activities. The placement of temporary or portable classroom facilities and the proposed renovation or construction of an existing school site to the extent the activity does not fall within the exceptions set forth below or paragraph 18. So, however, the construction that changes the primary use of a facility, construction of stadiums or construction activity, this goes over what we basically said. These are the things that are not exempt. And that is essentially the bulk of the construction portion of the agreement. Any questions or comments?
It is a lot to go through,
Dane?
So where do we stand with the county as it's related to the Hillsborough County base? And can we enlighten the group as to what the challenge was? Are we allowed to do that?
Yes, absolutely.
So just so everybody's aware, in the design of Double M Middle School, which is going to be Lehigh Acres Middle School. At the time we started the design, the county was out improving Homestead. When they did those improvements to Homestead, they removed the right turn lane onto Sunrise Boulevard, which is the access to the school. Then when we came in to do our work, the TIS recommended a turn lane at that location. But the challenge was the county had gone in and already gotten an easement from Bethany Trace subdivision to put a stem wall in their sidewalk and all that kind of stuff as part of the roadway construction. So when we came in, we said, well, we can't reasonably build another turn lane, and you guys ignored it in your design of Homestead. So we went back and forth with the county DOT. We provided the Hillsborough County ruling that says unless it's adjacent to or through a school property, as schools shouldn't have to provide the off-site improvements. Those are technically the responsibility of that municipality. The county DOT and their attorneys vehemently disagree with us.
Based on this agreement, that's why I was pointing out to you, and in fact, I didn't point it out to you, but even in the 2009 agreement, there were a number of instances where it specifically talks about off-site improvements. So the assertion of the attorneys and the staff from Lee County Board of County Commissioners is that the local that because we have an interlocal with between Lee County School District and Lee County Board of County Commissioners. The Hillsborough County case is secondary, even though the Hillsborough County case actually specifically discusses this issue and says that any that this ruling should be, what was the language in it? I can't remember, but it basically says that the ruling should take precedence over any underlying interlocals. Because Hillsborough County had made that same made that same contention with the school district that they had an interlocal in place, and so the districts contended that they should provide offsite improvements to be null and voided by the interlocal, and the circuit judge, it was actually appealed, and it was upheld on appeal.
So that's one of the big challenges that with any school project, doesn't matter if it's a renovation or anything else, if you trigger that more than 5% student population, you've got to go get a development order. Getting a development order, you got to do a traffic impact statement. When you develop that traffic impact statement, if it states that there are other off-site improvements, i.e. turn lanes, lane widenings, whatever it may be, are required to keep the road within a certain level of service category, then those improvements have to be made. And so this falls under all of the schools that, you know, whether they're brand new or they're being expanded or renovated. You know, this very well could come up in the next 5 or 6 RFQs that we just went through, to be honest with you.
So the reason that I asked Dana, or Dana, to give the explanation is he was the one involved with the discussion back and forth with the county, and he was acting on our behalf regarding the traffic impact. So I'm going to answer your question the way you.
Because I'm still curious. We got anywhere.
No, we haven't, there's been no movement on their position. That because we have an interlocal in place that establishes offsite improvements and rulings for offsite improvements, that the interlocal is precedent to the Hillsborough case. And I think you know that we contend that it's not, because the Hillsborough case does specifically talk about an interlocal.
So, I guess, I mean, not knowing any more information on this, what was their reasons for deleting the turn lane in the first place? Did they know that the school was being built prior to them deleting it, or?
Yeah, because they extended the southbound left turn lane on the Sunrise.
My understanding that as we go to the board with a 5-year capital plan of what our bills are, this was listed in the 5-year capital plan, which is shared with the county, so yes, they should have had foreknowledge.
From design standards from DOT, it is my understanding, and I am not a traffic engineer, so I'm relying on what, you know, those folks that do that task specifically have told me, is that if you go, and I'm gonna take Homestead as the example, you go along Homestead, there are no right turn lanes at all. Eliminated them all.
Which is crazy.
Right, at the entrance to the school. And the reason they do that is because they say that if somebody's turning right, you have another lane to get over and go around that traffic. And so that's why they eliminated all those right turn lanes. So when we brought that up to them, that didn't matter.
I'm gonna give you my opinion of that, because I was here in 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, we built 25 schools or whatever. We went through the local and push back as much as you can. At the end of the day, you've gotta work with the people that are on the other side of the table with you.
Absolutely.
You gotta communicate with the people on the other side of the table. You gotta let them know what's going on, when it's gonna happen. Because if you push that interlocal, you're gonna push it right back on your face. So, and that's what they're doing right now. So you can rewrite that interlocal to favor you per the Tampa or Hillsborough requirement, and that's not gonna meet your views, because that's what they're pushing back right now as it is. So, this guy's job back here is the hardest, because whenever an RFP comes out for a school project, and there has been 4 or 5, he's gotta make sure that those county people or the city people or whoever we're dealing with understand the project and have money to be able to, he's gotta meet with them. We all have to go over there and talk to them, say, hey, this is what's gonna happen, this is what what we're thinking you're gonna do per the interlocal that's in effect now, so let's see what's going on. You can't be pushing projects unless you get that this end of the project done first, because you're gonna be sitting here spinning your wheels for 4 years.
Correct.
You're just there's gonna be somebody pushing you back.
We agree, we couldn't agree with you more.
We need to get ahead of every large capital project 5 years. That assumed value of the school and where it's gonna be needs to be put on their plate so that they can provide funding and put it in their capital plan.
For the
Well,
improvements
now-
that they have planned.
They'll hold you up. You think you want water for Lehigh Acres Water District? You ain't getting water hookups until you pay your fees.
LFGUA is happy.
And they let you know that you want your mitigation rights? Oh, well, you gotta take care of this first. So we're over a barrel because the school district needs stations and it needs schools and it needs stations. They don't care.
They're on a schedule, there's a set date when those are coming.
Well, yeah, to a certain extent, but there's a plan process. Some of these schools, we push, we're so far behind, we push them up right away, and municipalities aren't ready for them.
Right.
And there's obviously money, and there's impact fee money and stuff that these cities and municipalities, play games with. They don't do what they're supposed to do. So,
Yeah, that type of thing can be short notice. You can see it going down the road.
yeah.
Well, I think that's when they sit down for the next interlocal with the county, they gotta come up to hopefully some kind of a reasonable agreement. Whether it's you do this, we do this, or it's a shared cost, or, whatever it may be.
The time to talk to them is not when you got your project and you're going to them and say, hey, here's the
5 years
GIS
ago.
study. The time to talk to them is 2 years before, because this is coming down the pipe from what you'll, and then they can at least plan for it.
And that goes for shelter costs as well.
Right.
That same advance notice for funding notification should be part of those discussions as well as the offsite.
And then you got a mess on, Three Oaks Parkway down there.
We
Because
do.
when you build that K through 8, you're gonna have buses, 800 students, plus 50 buses coming in and out of that entrance on Three Oaks. And you're gonna have heck on your hands when teachers and when parents come up and say, why am I in this line for 2 hours waiting for my kid? So,
Well, the good thing about that site is that the site is big enough for us to do a lot of on-site stacking.
stacking is not the problem, it's exit into Three Oaks, left and right, north and south, and turn it into that site. So stacking, you don't have a stacking problem.
The beauty is there'll be signalization there, of which we're paying for, which we think we should. So,
Again,
Well, that one's adjacent to.
understood. But
It's
our predecessor,
It's right behind the post office, across from the library.
oh, right next to the post office, and the only undeveloped land. But Art, you bring up a great point. I mean, with the capital improvement plan that's in place, there should be discussions going on with the county right away so that everybody's on board at the county, the village, Benita Springs, Cape Coral, whoever it may be, that they know what's coming down the line.
And maybe that's the stance is like, okay, we're kind of against it with this go around. We'll take care of it this time, but you really need to help us out with the stuff that we can plan out and then kind of start planning for, with that 5-year capital plan of the expectations of where things are going.
I've asked operations planning that there should be 4 quarterly meetings with the county to discuss all these things. And I believe Kathy and Ken were speaking to that, and they may have already just had one like a week or 2 ago.
We're having one recently.
And the key to this is they need to have a responsible party. And what we found in some of our dealings with the county is unless you're an assistant county manager, you have no decision-making authority. So when you have these 4
You
quarterly
do make
meetings.
it be overridden.
Correct. You need to have a person that can make decisions and binding resolutions and agreements with you at our meetings of similar capacity.
And that's something that is in the 2002 interlocal agreement, is the coordination of those meetings. So that's something that we can certainly look at revising when we look through the document.
And the other thing that was a big hiccup that we hit on, and then is, yeah, it was hard to get them to come to a meeting, and then once they did, they're like, well, I have to go ask, I can't say anything.
And these are people that have director badges. So the problem is we're trying to develop a shelter, millions of dollars it costs, trying to get confirmation and concurrence, because it's a shared cost. And we can't get formal, when it comes to that point when you want it on writing in paper, they get scattered. And then it becomes a fight just to try and get direction and
So you know what,
confirmation.
that school is not a shelter, and you move on, you build a school.
Well,
Right,
the statute says we have an obligation, if you're a county in need, if you're deficit of seats, you have an obligation to work with your local emergency management entity. Now, the flip side is, we can be tough like that all we want, and then, it just so happened when we were talking shelters, 2 days later in the news press, the county was considering pulling their funding for the 50% of the SRO officer funding. So it's funny how I asked for $1 million or $2 million on one side, and now here it comes back. So it is a communication effort. Those 4 quarterly meetings, I think, are dramatically important to this long-term effort to allow them to put in their financial budget, long-term planning for the monies for the off-site work and the shelter costs and those things.
I think the key as we move forward, and when I say we, the school district, as you move forward, you know, what's happened in the past has happened in the past. And everybody's got to acknowledge it, learn from it, and come to a mutual agreement that benefits everybody. And I think that's the challenge. There's been bridges burned in the past. Actually, there have been highways burned in the past, that everybody needs to let go of and move on.
And by the way, in relationship to the effort that Dana just mentioned, we did come to a mutually acceptable resolution between us and the county. So, we aren't putting in the turn lane there, but we are putting in some offsite improvements at Richland.
Well, I don't know that we're at a deal that we really want at this point, but we're developing relationships. At the end of the day, we shouldn't be doing anything outside of our property boundary. So right now, they're forcing me to do that turn lane once I get ready to open J, that's part of the LDO. So, and any future development or expansion in that campus that goes above the numbers that were approved in the DO, I believe they're also potentially to put language in there where I gotta go fix homestead,
Yes.
correct?
That's
So,
correct.
we're a long way, we're getting better, and all the people we work with, my experience is, the people at our level are good people, they wanna work with us.
You're not the problem. I believe when we were doing this, the executive director for operations was the one that was handling interlocal. The board gave him the authority to work on it. He would meet with the local board, and we went through all that stuff.
I agree, but this goes even way back, this goes back to the superintendent back in the 2008 era, in that era, a lot of these interlocal agreements were drafted back in 08, 09, correct, Kathy?
Mhm.
So this goes, I mean, it's not just one person, it's just about one of those things where we've had to build seats, so, we'll take our pain and we just go and do what we need to do, but it's at an expense to school district dollars. So we need to have these 4-quarter meetings, we need to lay out information where they sign, they know what the dollar values are, what we need, and hopefully then our board members can start working on their counterparts at the county commission.
Any other comments?
So there is no like current communication system in place like what you're talking about to go?
We
There
have
is.
meetings, but more formal meetings need to occur, which they've begun to do over in planning and operations. And things need to be documented, there need to be sign-in sheets, there need to commit, and the most important person is, there needs to be a person of authority and responsibility that can commit the county to any kind of decisions that occur during these meetings. We can't
And the
just
school
keep-
district.
And the school district as well, yeah. I have no authority.
Both parties need
So,
to have responsible people there
to engage.
that can commit to something.
And is that what you were saying about the parties, kind of just, who are the parties? I mean, is that the, local fire districts, is it the city, the counties? Is that everybody? That's, because there's a lot of people that are,
This,
entities are, involved in these projects and this land development?
We deal with the development, the departments of community development. With them.
It's mainly the municipalities.
And see, out on this particular job, see, we're a little difficult, because we have a private water utility.
That's true.
Unfortunately, they got us by the throat, and we gotta conform because they're the utility entity. We have a private utility company, well, it's quasi-private, public, but LCEC. We have to have them bring services to us, and it's not free, it's not like they're a public entity that's gotta provide those services to us per statute. But the one we can control is this particular case, which is Lee County. Now, what made this a little even more quasi-disturbing than MM is it's a private road right now. So how can I force the county to do improvements on a private road? I can't. Now, someday they'll take over this road, but, you look in the past, we had to do a traffic signal turn lane improvements on, Imperial Parkway in front of Benita Springs High School. That was about $750,000, right there. We just did a Gateway High School out on Griffith Parkway. We had to do a traffic circle.
Right.
With sidewalk improvements and utilities in front of that, all to get into this school. So, and that was around 600 grand plus. So when you start adding up all these improvements and things, which your impact fee money is supposed to be provided, not school district's percentage of impact, but the county's percentage of impact for roadways, infrastructure, and improvements because of the expansion of the development. And that's not happening. So where's that money going? It's not going to our road improvement.
It's going to their affordable housing fund, which has nothing to do with cost.
Well, I mean, it's worth digging into, their contractual obligations, hosting entities themselves.
They have a certain percentage, if I'm not mistaken, at the last time when we were trying to grovel and get a little bit more of ours back that we gave up in the pinch time. I think they were even short sheeting their own, Department of Transportation's percentages as well. So,
in my industry with roads and bridges that we do, I don't remember the last time I built a bridge or any kind of road improvements for just Lee County. It's more just DOT, state stuff, but Collier County, we're bidding bridges. It seems like once a month, we're building bridges or road improvements and stuff like that in Collier County all the time. Just Lee County is not using their money for that.
I mean, Lee County wanted me to build a bridge.
That's true, they did.
I was gonna become a bridge builder. I was gonna learn from you. The expert.
But,
That's not kidding, he's actually serious, they wanted us to build.
know.
Yeah.
We went over that.
That's where we got the
last year,
Oh, that's right.
So, history tells us that Collier County is always one or two steps ahead of Lee County. Lee County is always one or two steps ahead of Charlotte County, Hendry County. So it's, we'd all like to be like Collier County, but they have that tax base, they get all that money, so they put it into their infrastructure.
Right.
And they try and stay ahead of the game. Lee County is trying to stay ahead of the game. It's a challenge, it's a balancing act, and
Well, and they roll back their impact fees because the economy's bad, and then never roll them back the other way when the economy's good. And then the economy goes bad and it comes back again.
back in. So I don't know if you guys, any of you heard, but City of Benita Springs just lowered their building permit fees by 75%.
Reserve.
All municipalities are doing that. Are they?
Except for town, Fort Myers.
Cape Coral, Fort Myers, Lee County, Benita Springs, they're all because the reason for that is that, when you pay for a building permit, there's a fund that goes into this fund that's supposed to manage the building department services for everybody that pulls permits. Right. And that fund keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and they can't spend it unless they spend it in this department. And at some point, committees like us, enough is enough, I'm not paying these fees anymore, you got all this money here, you better do something with it. Oh, let's lower permit fees, so finally, we're putting pressure that they're lowering this cost here.
Instead of hiring people to get permits out faster.
Oh, and by the way.
Well, they're hiring, it takes longer to hire people, it's a full-time person. takes a while.
And by the way, whenever I have off-site work that I'm being forced to fund, I also have to pay for them to review and approve the plan.
So this is all these like issues surface when it's going through like the development order, that's the problem, right? So you already, say the district procures some land, they can only really do some feasibility studies and kind of just do an overall study of it, then they get it, then these things are all surfacing through the development order process.
That's when they
Is that
come to a
right?
head, yes.
Yeah,
But
so
when
I'm getting
the,
ahead of that.
yeah, when the school district is looking to purchase land, they can do some preliminary studies to get some ideas if the road network is failing or what type of, offsite improvements might be needed. And this is just my own opinion. They can sit down at that point, before they buy the land. And then once they buy the land, then they can go back to the county and say, okay, we've now purchased this land. We plan on building on it in 5 years, whatever it may be. That's our best guess at this time. Either,
Yeah, we've gone ahead with the two potential land purchases that we're currently looking at. We've gone ahead and shared that information with the county, and we've received a due diligence package with the full report on the land use. And, not just the future land use, the surrounding infrastructure, the roadways, everything. The problem that we're having, at least that I see, is kind of a little problematic to what you were saying, is there isn't a site plan that's developed at the time. So there isn't a plan that we can just go and say, well, this is where exactly what our bus loop is gonna look like, this is what the access comfortability. The only things that we really have at that point are the capacity information and how large the school's gonna be, based off student
Just
station.
infrastructure, existing infrastructure,
Right.
what's there.
When you buy the land, you really don't have a plan in place, you have a regional location of certain spots that you
Right.
think is gonna happen, but in 10 years, that site might go away, the Benita site is gone now.
Tower Road.
Yeah, that Tower Road that we thought we would put something there, that's gone, so that change, every 10 years it changes on you, but you can plan as much as you can.
Yeah, you're gonna stay up ahead of the curve, because by the time you really need the land, it is gonna be the most expensive that it could possibly be. So, yeah, exactly, like you said, you roll the dice on what you're gonna need 8 years from now, and what if Lehigh doesn't boom, but, South Mines does, or vice versa, or something like that, and you just don't need it over there, so.
And we are working with a company that does production specifically to monitor that and get a better idea of when we were gonna need those schools to come online.
So just remember too, all the good land is gone.
Oh, yeah.
And all that's left now is scrub. Wet scrub, no utilities, crappy little roads. That's it. And unfortunately, our schools take, 20, 30, 50 acre plots. And they're hard to come by anymore. Yep.
But, yeah, I think Scott really hit, kind of drive home the point is not having the meetings and having the conversations, because you can have those and they turn out great and they're good people and you all agree. And then you write down what you all agreed to and you said, here you go, we all agreed to this. I'm like, whoa, we didn't agree to anything. And,
That's happened?
I know,
Well, you gotta set the baseline. And if you have that foreknowledge in those meetings and the understanding, then you can engage your legal to go fight the fight like the other county did. Up until this point, remember, we went through a period from '08 where building stopped.
Right.
We had nothing. The departments, planning, were decimated other than 1 or 2 people. And now we're starting to build back up. We have the tax referendum. So now it's time to get back in the game and engage.
And one thing I do want to add is that during our due diligence period, we have built into our proposals with our civil engineers who conducted due diligence, that they are required to have at least one meeting with the county DOT to start vetting out those issues, kind of beforehand as soon as possible, so that they are completely aware that these schools are coming and what the capacity is going to look like.
Excellent. Yeah, it's like those more or less pre-app meetings with the
Exactly.
counties and get everybody around the table, but everybody forgets what they said.
Yeah, I was gonna
Years
say,
later.
what documentation.
It's in we end up including that into the traffic impact statement, that's part of or the traffic memorandum, that's part of the due diligence report that we received from the engineer.
and I think that's part of the discussion that, it's not the best, you always want to plan it out, but having the sales tax and them being so against it like they were, just adds another layer of complication to the matter, you know? And they just have a perception of like, well, you got all this extra money coming in, why aren't you paying for it? And, then you say, well, what are you doing with our impact fees?
That was kind of how the discussion went.
Yeah, and I can see how that could be pretty dynamic when it's like you don't really have people that monitor what's happening in the adjacent properties all the time. You know, it's like, probably what happened there, you didn't know that they were gonna be doing all that, obviously with the Hillsborough project, right?
Well, fortunately, we mark our property. When we buy property, the district puts out a 4x8 sheet with the district logo saying the future school building, ancillary school district facility, and so as these other parcels hopefully around us start to be developed. But at the end of the day, most of where we've developed, we own the property before the development occurred, and the people still come out of the woodwork, you know, you're destroying our quality of life, you know, we bought here thinking it was gonna be preserved or legal, or
Well, and I know, I'm not, do we, besides the Three Oaks property, we have, what's the school on Corkscrew, down Corkscrew? Pinewoods. Besides Pinewoods, that Corkscrew corridor, in 10 or 15 years, you're not gonna recognize it. Do we have land down at Corkscrew that,
Every 2 weeks, I don't recognize it, I swear.
Exactly.
well, the other thing is, you know, making agreements with developers. There's 4,000 homes that are being planned right now down at Corkscrew, plus 2,000 that are being built now.
And I'm familiar with that. Before coming to the school district, I worked as a private sector land use planner. So I did part of the permitting for Verdana Village, in Cameron Company. And we had very preliminary discussions with them on potentially having a school site in that area because of the amount of development going on. Looking at their property specifically, there's nothing that can be done to the school site at this time, since they've already gone through the site approval process and there's no way to do it. But we're definitely keeping an eye on that
And that's kind of like the Alico extension, going from like the I-Tech down, and maybe some properties up in that neck of the woods, kind of closer by the airport.
you bring up a great point. Maybe that's something that should be interactive with the interlocal agreement. That no development expansion can occur unless concurrency with the local school district to provide seats for those students.
I think you have that now somewhere.
You understand what I'm saying, just like we did at River Hall. If you wanna build a development, you need to have school seats. And if you don't provide the roadway and the infrastructure and the funding, I don't know, I'm not a lawyer, but I would think that
Well, we
So I can
have,
tell you right now, as you go through that process, through all those processes, through rezoning and comp plan amendment, no matter what it is, the school district gets a letter from whoever's developing that property or their representative requesting that information, because that is required for all applications.
So if the
And that
school,
letter always comes back that, yes, there are seats available.
well, then that's a problem. Because
There's only one county that I'm aware of, and that doesn't mean it's the only county, but there's only one county that I'm aware of that has has put really strong teeth into their concurrency legislation, concurrency laws, and that's Orange County. Orange County has some really, really strong teeth in their concurrency agreement and the way they do concurrency, and, if a developer is going to build, they have to contribute to the school, the cost of the school upfront.
well, that sounds like that should be one of the templates.
It's just, I'm not, and I say that because, Orange County also builds about 3 schools a year. I mean, they're growing an awful lot of school children. But to say that of the counties that I work with closely, and there's something called the I-4 Coalition, and it's basically every school district that from Collier County to, Collier up to Pasco, and then from Hillsborough to, Brevard area. So basically, kind of the highway, the central and southeast corridor highway. And Orange County, of all of those counties, is really the only one that really has strong teeth in their concurrency agreements.
So just for a little bit of background on how our concurrency works, is they send that letter and
we, let's say, do not have capacity in that zone, that subzone, because we are divided into east, south, no, sorry, east, south, west, yes. And within each zone, there's subzones. If that developer is in E1, east subzone 1, they can essentially say, okay, well, if there's not enough capacity in E1, we can go to E2. We can basically use the capacity from any adjacent subzone to satisfy their development. And that's the way our concurrency is currently written.
And that actually looks by statute requires
So if
that.
you were to limit it just to the specific subzone of the development, it may force people to come to the table.
We would need to change, because of statute.
Florida statute requires, so the Florida statute, concurrency provides direction by which you have to evaluate things, and one of them is looking at adjacent school zones.
Yeah, that-
The only way changing it
Unless
would be
there's-
changing the zone.
Unless there's some sort of divider, like you could, like a river, or, you know, like there has to be a reason
But I
that
mean,
you can't look at the
There's still
adjacent
forcing
school
money,
zones.
because if you don't have it in the subzone, you're now forcing the school district to pay transportation costs of people, plus those kids, because of that brand new development, to another subzone to beat the beat.
As I said, of all the counties that I'm aware of, and I'm, you know, maybe down in South Florida, Miami-Dade, Broward, maybe one of those counties is different, maybe Jacksonville is different. But Orange County is the only one that I'm aware of that really has any teeth in their concurrency, and that a lot of it has to do because of the growth, or their growth rate, and the cost that it was, and the cost of development. But, most counties have just had a really hard time putting teeth into their concurrency agreements, and they do it, you know, it goes back to, I think what you said, Ryan, it's about and what you said, Art, it's about working as partnerships, because in the end, teeth doesn't really end up working. And unfortunately, you know, great agreement, the interlocals are important for one major reason, even though I agree with you, Art, that it's all about, in the end, the partnership, the personal relationship, the working together. But it's a whole lot easier to work together when you have a foundation of a strong interlocal agreement. And so, you know, we appreciate your comments today. And
You can't get them to willingly and voluntarily step into those teeth.
Well, I mean,
not the way our current agreement is written.
We have to
there's
show them
another,
what the implications are, what the benefits would be to them if we start reducing, you know, the bus traffic that we have on the roads and things like that.
There's a-
What would be those benefits?
there's a backdoor way of doing that. When the developers plan, and you get these concurrency plans of 3,000, 4,000 homes, which is across the street from where I'm living at. You go in and say, you know, we need a school site here, can you plan it? Because 4,000, where I'm living at now, there's 4,000 homes planned. Probably 60% of them are families, young families with kids, and they're not going to Pinewood. They'd like to get something nearby. So you insert yourself in that process. You're not asking for anything free. You're asking for a site location and maybe impact fee money releases, you know, that the developer can use impact fee money that you have to pay into the system for that site. So it's a win-win for everybody.
That's kind of like what you did at River Hall.
Yeah.
All right, we're a couple minutes past our time limit, so I'd like to try to keep somewhat on schedule. There was one other housekeeping item that I overlooked the first time around. During our quarterly report to the board, Ms. Giddens, board member Giddens, had requested a slight modification to our last meeting minutes. Ms. Morgan's comments about the subzoning of school children and that they're looking into applying it for the next year, breaking down the neighborhood school initiative type of
Proximity
proximity plan.
Okay.
She took Julia took your notes relatively accurately, but it wasn't specifically noted to be for only elementary school students. So she was one that clarified that, you know, the proximity plan is just elementary school students at this particular point. So, yeah, there was one minor amendment to that. I kind of sent Julia a note on that, so I don't think that got into the distributed minutes, but
Yes.
it is. You got it already?
Yeah, it says a new proximity plan is being drafted for elementary schools
All right.
for the 23 school year.
Wow, this is Julia, man.
Got it, don't worry.
He keeps us in line.
Alright, so no comment needed, that's just a general FYI for everyone's attention then. With that, we'll be getting back into some procurement responses as well as any follow-up conversations from this at our next meeting. Go around the room once for the good of the order. Starting the same way we chimed in.
Good.
Any parting shots?
I'm good.
Good. All right, can I get a motion for adjournment?
Motion made, so moved.
All in favor? Opposed? Thank you very